The wind howled across the quiet lanes of Stratford-upon-Avon as Nora Whitlock stood by the kitchen window, watching the final crumbs of daylight fade behind the birch trees. Her evenings had always been predictable since the night her daughter vanished 8 years ago. Gavin, her husband, usually arrived home late from the workshop, and Nora filled the silence with old music and faded memories. But that night felt different. Still. Heavy. Almost expectant. Nora walked towards the front door to turn the lock when she heard it. A soft knock. Then another. Not urgent, but steady. Almost rehearsed. She hesitated. Hardly anyone visited this late. When she finally opened the door, the cold air rushed in, and standing on the front step was a girl. Thin. Pale. Soaked to the skin. Her hair curled tightly to her face as though clinging to any warmth it could find. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes, a stormy grey, locked with Nora's. Her lips trembled before forming 2 quiet words that struck Nora like lightning. Mum. It is me. Nora's knees weakened. Her breath shattered in her chest. The world seemed to tilt. The girl stepped forward, her voice barely more than a whisper. I am Emily. The name tore through the quiet house. Emily. The child Nora had searched for, prayed for, cried for, and mourned for. The child who had disappeared at the age of 8 without a single trace. Nora touched the girl's face with trembling fingertips. Her skin was cold, and her pulse fluttered beneath it, faint but real. She looked older, of course. 15 or 16 now. But the eyes. The eyes were almost identical. Gavin arrived home moments later, the tires of his van crunching over gravel. When he saw the girl standing in the doorway, he froze. His expression hardened. Unlike Nora, he did not break. He stared at the girl as though she were a shadow pretending to be human. Emily, you say? The girl nodded slowly, avoiding his gaze. Nora pulled her inside and wrapped her in a blanket, fussing like a mother desperate not to lose her again. Gavin remained by the doorway, watching, silent, rigid, his jaw clenched tightly. When Nora asked the girl where she had been, the girl simply lowered her head. I was taken away. That is all I can say for now. Nora swallowed hard, her hands trembling. Gavin's eyes narrowed. Later that night, after the girl had eaten and changed into dry clothes, Nora brought out an old wooden box that had belonged to Emily. Inside were drawings, a silver bracelet, and a photo album. The girl touched the bracelet gently. The way her fingers lingered over it made Nora's heart ache. But Gavin's doubt grew stronger. She remembers too much, he murmured to Nora when the girl was out of earshot. No hesitation. No confusion. It is as if she practiced these answers. Nora shot him a furious glare. Do not say such things. She came home. That is all that matters. But even as she said it, Nora felt the slightest tremor of fear settle at the base of her spine. Because there was one thing the girl had not done. One thing Emily used to love more than anything. She had not gone near the old piano in the living room. Nora told herself it meant nothing. Children changed. Trauma changed people. But still. The silence around the piano felt heavier than the storm outside. Later, long after everyone had gone to bed, Nora woke unexpectedly. A sound rippled through the hallway. Soft. Slow. Footsteps. She stepped out from her bedroom and saw a faint glow coming from the end of the corridor. The girl was standing by the front door, still wrapped in the blanket, staring through the small glass pane into the darkness outside. Nora's voice shook. Emily, what are you looking at? The girl did not turn around. Her whisper was barely audible. Someone followed me here. Nora's heart lurched. Before she could respond, the girl turned her head just enough for her voice to reach Nora with chilling clarity. And he is still out there. A shiver traveled down Nora's spine as she stepped closer, but when she looked through the window, there was nothing. Only darkness. But the girl kept staring, unblinking. As if she knew exactly where the man was hiding. And as Nora stood beside her, realizing she knew nothing about what the girl had escaped from, the thought she had fought all evening finally surfaced. What if this was Emily? And what if bringing her home had awakened something far worse? The next morning dawned pale and wet, a thin mist crawling across the gardens behind the Whitlock home. Nora woke early, her mind a restless storm after the unsettling whispers of the night. She half expected to find the girl standing at the door again, staring out into the darkness. But instead, she found her in the kitchen. The girl sat at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, as if she had always belonged there. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains and brushed against her face, revealing details Nora had not noticed the night before. Small freckles across the bridge of her nose. A faint scar near her temple. Hair that fell in uneven waves, as though cut in haste. Nora's breath caught. Emily had once had freckles. Emily had once fallen from a tree and scraped her forehead. For a moment, Nora felt the familiar pull of hope. The dangerous, consuming kind. "Good morning," Nora said softly. The girl looked up. She did not smile. Her eyes were rimmed with red, as though she had not slept. "He was there again," she whispered. Nora stiffened. "He who, dear?" The girl's gaze slid toward the window. "The man. I saw him standing by the hedge. He watched the house for a long time. Then he left." Nora turned to the window instinctively, but of course, there was nothing. Only trees heavy with mist. Before Nora could question her further, Gavin entered the room. He paused in the doorway, looking at the girl the way one might look at an unexploded device. He forced a greeting, then sat down with his coffee. His eyes, however, never left her. Nora tried to break the tension. "Emily, love, is there anything else you can tell us? Anything at all?" The girl stirred her tea slowly, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in a steady rhythm. "There are things I remember," she said. "But they will not make sense. Not yet." "Tell us what you can," Nora urged. The girl lifted her eyes, and what Nora saw in them made her heart knock hard against her ribs. "I remember a room with no windows. A bed with metal bars. The sound of someone crying in the next room. And a voice telling me not to speak unless I was spoken to." Gavin's chair scraped loudly as he stood. "That is enough for now," he said sharply. The girl flinched. Nora shot Gavin a furious look. "She is traumatized," Nora hissed. "Let her speak." Gavin lowered his voice, though the anger pulsed beneath it. "Children who have lived through real trauma do not speak so calmly. She is reciting these things. As if she learned them." The girl looked down at her hands again. Later that morning, while Nora fetched clothes from the dryer, she noticed the girl wandering through the hallway. Her steps were slow, careful, as though mapping out the house from memory. She stopped outside the music room. The old piano sat silently inside, its keys bathed in dusty light. The girl stared at it for a long time. Nora watched from the doorway, barely breathing. "Emily, do you remember this piano?" The girl hesitated. Her voice came soft and strained. "I think so. But it feels wrong. Like it belongs to another life." Nora stepped closer, heart pounding. "Would you like to try playing something?" The girl shook her head, took a step back, then turned away entirely, almost as if frightened by it. Nora swallowed hard. The fear she had pushed aside the night before crept back in. That afternoon, Nora brought out a box of old belongings. She hoped that familiar objects might comfort the girl. Inside were Emily's childhood treasures, a crocheted rabbit, a pink hair ribbon, and a small leather notebook Emily used to write in. The girl's fingers paused over the notebook. "This was mine," she whispered. Nora's heart leapt. "You remember it?" The girl opened it. The pages were filled with childish handwriting, drawings, and small pressed flowers. But then she turned to the last page. Her face drained of color. "Nora. I did not write this." Nora leaned in. The final note was scribbled hastily, the letters uneven. "He said he will come for me tonight. If I do not come back, it is because he found out." Nora gasped. She had never seen that message before. Emily had disappeared the very next day. Before Nora could speak, the girl looked up, her voice trembling. "Nora. I think the man who took me is still alive." Nora froze. Gavin entered just then, and the girl snapped the notebook shut. But Gavin had already seen Nora's expression. What happened now? Nora handed him the notebook, pointing at the last page. Gavin read it, his eyes darkening. He exhaled slowly, then looked directly at the girl. "You want us to believe you found this now? After 8 years? After returning out of nowhere? Convenient, is it not?" The girl's eyes glistened with tears. "I am telling the truth." Gavin stepped closer, voice low, leaning toward her with quiet intensity. "If you are truly Emily, then tell me the name of the teacher who used to visit the house. The one who helped you practice reading every Thursday." The girl blinked rapidly. Her lips parted. I. She looked to Nora, panicked. "I do not remember." Gavin's jaw tightened. "Because you are not her." The girl burst into tears and fled the room, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. Nora rounded on Gavin. "You frightened her." Gavin's voice trembled with frustration. "Because something is wrong, Nora. This girl, she knows things she should not know, and she does not know what Emily should. You are letting your heart blind you." Nora turned away from him, torn between fear and fury. Upstairs, the girl locked herself in the guest room. Nora could hear her sobbing through the door. But late that night, Nora woke again. A sound drifted through the house. Soft creaking. Floorboards shifting under careful steps. Nora stepped into the corridor once more. And there, in the dim light, she saw the girl standing outside the locked study door. A thin piece of metal was in her hand, and she was trying to force the lock open. "Emily, what are you doing?" The girl jumped, dropping the metal tool. Nora picked it up, her voice chilling. "This is a lockpick." The girl's face went pale. "I am sorry. But I need to know what you are hiding in there." Nora's breath hitched. "I am hiding nothing." The girl stared back at her, eyes cold and ancient, as though she was suddenly much older than 16. "That is untrue, Nora. Because this house has secrets. And so do you." Morning arrived with a heavy sky, clouds pressed low over Stratford-upon-Avon as though mirroring the weight inside the Whitlock home. Gavin had already left for work, leaving Nora alone with the girl who claimed to be Emily. Their breakfast passed in silence, tension hanging thickly between them. The girl barely touched her toast. Her eyes drifted again and again to the staircase, towards the locked study upstairs. Nora tried to steady her voice. "Emily, why were you trying to open that door?" The girl traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "Because I heard something inside. A sound moving along the walls." Nora felt her skin prickle. "There are no animals in this house," she said quickly. The girl lifted her gaze. "I never said it was an animal." The words hung in the air like mist. Nora pushed her chair back abruptly, trying to shake off the unease curling inside her. She needed air. Space. Clarity. She excused herself and walked into the garden, the cold damp grass brushing against her shoes. She stood near the birch trees, exhaling a breath she did not realize she had been holding. But even there, peace would not come. Something flickered at the edge of the garden. A shadow. A figure. Nora squinted, her heart leaping painfully. A man stood by the hedge. Still. Watching the house. Her breath caught in her throat. She blinked, and he was gone. She backed away quickly, returning indoors. When she closed the door behind her, she found the girl standing in the hallway, as if she had been waiting. "You saw him too," the girl whispered. Nora's voice trembled. "Who is he?" The girl hugged herself, shrinking into the oversized jumper Nora had given her. "He is the one who kept me. The one who said I had to be someone else. The one who changed my name." Nora stared at her, horrified. But before she could gather her thoughts, the girl asked quietly, "Nora, what is in your study?" Nora steadied herself, reminding her voice to be firm. "Just documents. Old bills. Things from Gavin's workshop. Nothing more." The girl did not blink. "That is not what I heard." Her certainty sent a chill through Nora. She forced herself to walk past the girl, refusing to be pulled into this strange paranoia. But as she passed the foot of the stairs, something made her stop. The study key, normally hanging on the hook by the cupboard, was missing. Nora's heart thudded. She spun quickly. "Emily, did you take the key?" The girl's face showed genuine confusion. "No. I have not touched it." Nora hurried upstairs. The door to the study remained closed, undisturbed. She tried the handle. Still locked. But the missing key gnawed at her thoughts. She began searching the bedrooms, the bathroom, the wardrobe, the drawers. A rising dread filled her with each empty place. Then she opened the airing cupboard. And there, on the top shelf, lay the study key. Covered in dust. As though it had been placed there a long time ago. Nora frowned. She had not opened this cupboard in months. Downstairs, a faint sound drifted up to her. A melody. Slow. Uneven. Nora rushed down. She stopped abruptly outside the music room. The girl was sitting at the old piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling as though fighting a memory. Nora stepped forward. "Emily." Before she finished, the girl pressed a single note. Then another. Clumsy. Uncertain. Emily had once played beautifully. Flawlessly. But this girl touched the keys like someone who had never learned. Nora's breath tightened. The girl looked up at her. "I wanted to try," she said softly. "I thought it might help me remember." Nora forced a smile, but inside, confusion coiled tighter. That afternoon, the girl rummaged in the living room, as though searching for something she could not name. She lifted books, checked behind photo frames, sifted through drawers. Nora asked sharply, "What are you looking for?" The girl did not stop. "Proof," she said simply. "Proof of what?" The girl straightened slowly, holding a faded photograph. "You had a visitor in this house shortly before I disappeared. A woman. I remember her perfume. Jasmine. Sweet but strong." Nora swallowed hard. She recognized the woman the girl mentioned. A private tutor who had come only a few times. A kind woman named Margaret. But she had not told anyone about her. Not even Gavin. Nora's voice cracked. "How do you know that?" The girl closed her eyes. "I heard her arguing with you. I could hear everything through the vents." She was frightened. She said someone had been following her. She said it was not safe for me to stay here. Nora stepped back as if struck. That argument had happened 2 days before Emily vanished. And only 2 people had been in the house. Nora herself. And her daughter. The girl opened her eyes again, and for the first time since she arrived, her gaze held a quiet certainty. I remember more than you think, Nora. But the memories come in pieces. And some of them frighten me. Nora felt the floor tilt beneath her. Before she could reply, the girl whispered. There is something hidden in this house. Something you did not want anyone to find. Nora's pulse pounded in her ears. What do you mean? The girl stepped closer, her voice lowering. There is a door inside the study. Behind the tall cabinet. A door that should not exist. Nora felt her breath stop. The girl continued. And whatever is behind it. I think it is the reason I disappeared. The sky over Ashford Hollow was a muted grey, the kind that made the village feel smaller and slower than usual. Elena walked home from work with her coat pulled tight, her thoughts circling endlessly around Joseph's warning and the strange whisper in her friend's voice when she spoke of the forest. As she turned onto Fennel Road, she noticed a figure standing beneath the old street lamp. A tall man, motionless, his face cast in shadow. At first she thought he might be a neighbor, someone simply enjoying the cold air. But as she drew nearer, a chill spread along her spine. The man did not move. He did not even shift his weight. He watched. Elena slowed her pace instinctively. There was something wrong in the way he stood, hands tucked into the pockets of a long dark coat, head slightly tilted toward her. Every step closer felt like stepping into a deeper silence, a deeper cold. When she was only a few houses away, he finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, and far too calm. You should not walk home alone at this hour. Elena stopped at once. Her breath turned thin. I am sorry, do I know you? The stranger smiled, though the light never touched his eyes. Not yet. But we will meet again soon. Before she could respond, he stepped away from the street lamp. His coat shifted with the movement, and Elena glimpsed something beneath it. A long, pale scar trailing from his jaw down toward his collar. The sight rooted her to the spot. He walked past her without another glance, his footsteps soundless on the damp pavement. Only when he had turned the corner did she realize she had been holding her breath. Elena hurried home, locked the door, and leaned against it. The silence inside the cottage pressed hard against her ears. Joseph's words resurfaced. The forest knows when someone lies. But as Elena looked through the window toward the dimly lit street, she felt a new truth settle uneasily in her chest. It was not the forest she feared now. It was the man who knew her name before she offered it, the man with the scar, the man who promised they would meet again. Yet later that night, just as she was preparing for bed, she found something on her doorstep. Something wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with rough twine. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, written in uneven black ink. Do not let anyone speak for the forest. It is already speaking to you. As she stared at the words, her hands trembling, an uncanny breeze drifted through the narrow gap beneath the doorframe. It carried with it the faint smell of pine, earth, and something older. Something listening. Elena stepped back as the lamp beside her flickered once, twice, then settled into a low, wavering glow. She whispered into the stillness. What do you want from me? And the house answered only with silence. But Elena sensed, somehow, that something outside had heard her. And it was waiting. A thin drizzle swept across Ashford Hollow the following morning, tapping softly against the cottage windows like restless fingertips. Elena barely slept. Each time she drifted close to rest, the image of the stranger beneath the street lamp pulled her back awake, his calm voice echoing in her mind. She moved through her morning routine with a heaviness that felt stitched into her bones. The message he left gnawed at her. Do not let anyone speak for the forest. It is already speaking to you. But Elena had never heard anything. At least, she did not think she had. By mid-afternoon, she stood beneath the hatch leading to the attic. She could not explain why she felt drawn to it. Perhaps it was the unease in her chest, or the cold draft that had crept down the staircase all morning, as though something above was breathing differently than the rest of the house. She pulled the cord. The wooden ladder unfolded with a hesitant groan. Dust swirled in the air as she climbed, coughing when the scent of old timber and mothballs wrapped around her. The attic was dim, light spilling only from a small round window at the far end. Boxes lined the walls, relics of her grandmother's belongings that Elena had never had the courage to sort through. She was about to descend again when she heard it. A soft, deliberate sound. Footsteps. Right above her head. She froze. The roof was too low for anyone to stand on. And yet the footsteps moved with purpose, slow and measured, as if pacing. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth to quiet her breath. Another step. And another. A dry whisper seemed to curl out of the beams. Not a voice, but something close. A drag of air, a shift in the dust, almost a word but not quite formed. Elena's fingers tightened around the nearest box. She whispered, barely audible. "Who is up here?" The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and breathless. Then, from somewhere near the window, came a faint tapping. Not quite a knock, not quite the wind. A message. Elena stepped closer despite every instinct urging her to flee. The dust beneath her boots shifted. She reached the window and found, to her astonishment, a small collection of twigs arranged neatly on the sill. 3 long twigs, then 2 short ones, then a final long twig. A pattern. Deliberate. Elena knelt slowly. She recognized the bark immediately. Pine. But the nearest pines were deep inside the woodland, far from any path leading to the village. She brushed her fingers lightly over the twigs. They were cold, almost unnaturally so. Beneath them, scratched faintly into the wooden sill, were words she had never seen before. Words that made her stomach drop. "It is not the man you should fear." Elena stood abruptly, heart pounding. The ladder behind her swayed slightly. And then she heard it again. But this time, the footsteps were not in the attic. They were climbing the stairs to the upper floor of the cottage. Slow. Patient. Coming closer. Elena turned toward the attic entrance, her blood running cold. Someone was inside her home. And she could not tell whether it was the man with the scar. Or something that had come from the forest itself. She backed away from the hatch, pulse trembling in her throat. The footsteps reached the landing. Then stopped. Elena held her breath. A single whisper rose from below. A voice she did not recognize. "You have something that belongs to us." The light on the landing flickered as Elena remained frozen in the attic, her breath shallow and trembling. The whisper from below slid through the air like something alive, something that had no right to speak with a human tongue. "You have something that belongs to us." Elena pressed a hand to her chest, forcing herself to swallow the rising panic. She moved silently towards the hatch and peered down through the narrow gap. The corridor below was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the wall lamp. There was no one there. No shadow. No movement. But something had spoken. Something had climbed the stairs. Elena descended the ladder step by cautious step, her feet barely making a sound. When she reached the landing, she paused and listened. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that seemed pressed into every wall, as if even the air was holding its breath. She checked each room. The small guest room. The bathroom. Her own bedroom. All empty. All untouched. Yet the feeling of being watched clung to her. She found herself drawn back to the living room, where the fire had burnt down to faint embers. The windows were cold and misted, reflecting only her shadow as she stood before them. That was when she noticed it. Outside, in the drizzle, stood a figure. Not the man with the scar. Someone smaller. A woman. She was dressed in a long coat, her hood pulled low, her posture stiff as she stared directly at the cottage. Elena's breath caught. The woman did not move, did not blink, did not shift her weight. Elena whispered. "Who are you?" The woman raised one hand slowly. In her palm lay something small and metallic. Elena leaned closer, squinting through the rain. A key. Old, rusted, and unmistakably familiar. The same kind of key Elena had found in her grandmother's belongings. A key rumored to unlock one of the old cabins deep within Ashford Hollow Forest. Elena's heart thudded. The woman curled her fingers around the key, stepped back, and vanished into the darkness between the trees without a single sound. Elena rushed to the front door, fumbling with the latch. When she swung it open, cold rain washed against her face. She stepped out onto the porch, searching the shadows. No figure. No movement. No footprints on the wet ground. But the doorframe held something new. Something wedged into the wood. A note. Folded and damp at the edges. Elena tore it free with shaking fingers and unfolded it. 3 words stared back at her in jagged handwriting. Return the girl. Elena staggered back a step. Her skin prickled. Her pulse hammered. The girl. Did they mean Lucy? Or did they mean someone else entirely? She folded the note slowly, her hands trembling as the wind pushed against her coat. The forest swayed in the distance, dark and restless, as if listening. Behind her, inside the house, a single floorboard creaked. Soft. Deliberate. The same sound as before. The sound of someone waiting. Elena turned, dread dripping through her veins. This time she was certain. Whatever had entered her home earlier had not left. By the next evening, rain had turned the village lanes into rivers of mud, and the forest loomed darker than ever against the twilight sky. Elena could not ignore the note. Her mind raced with one question: which girl? She drove slowly to the edge of Ashford Hollow Forest, the headlights slicing through the sheets of rain. Somewhere within the twisted oaks and thick undergrowth was a cabin, a place whispered about by villagers but rarely seen. And in that cabin, the girl. The forest was alive with sounds, distant cracking of branches, the hush of leaves dripping with water, and the occasional snap of twigs under unseen feet. Elena gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. When she reached a clearing, a faint glow shimmered between the trees. The cabin. Small. Ancient. Its windows dark except for a single candle burning inside. She stepped out, rain soaking her hair and coat, and approached carefully. Her heart hammered as she neared the door. Then she saw her. A girl. Thin, shivering, with hair plastered to her face by the rain. She looked no older than 16, but her eyes carried a weight beyond her years. Elena called softly. "Are you all right?" The girl flinched but did not run. Instead, she held up her hand, pointing to the cabin. He knows I am here. He will come." Elena swallowed. "Who is he?" The girl shook her head. "I cannot say. But you must help me before he finds me." Elena nodded, heart pounding. "I will. Come with me." The girl hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Then she stepped forward, and Elena could see the bruises along her arms and shoulders, the signs of long confinement. As they moved toward Elena's car, a sound ripped through the forest. Branches snapping. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. The girl froze. "He is here." Elena grabbed her hand. "Run." They sprinted through the muddy forest path, rain blinding them, leaves slapping against their faces. Behind them, a dark figure emerged among the trees, moving faster than thought possible, closing in with silent menace. Elena's lungs burned, her hands raw from holding the girl's tight grip. And then the cabin flickered with the last light of the candle, extinguished suddenly, as though the forest itself swallowed it. The girl whispered, trembling. "He always finds the light first." Elena stumbled, pulling the girl forward. The figure's presence was near now, almost tangible, pressing against them like a living shadow. They reached the edge of the forest. The village lights twinkled like distant stars, a small promise of safety. Elena slowed, catching her breath. But the girl's gaze remained fixed on the trees. He will not give up. Not ever. Elena knew then that the fight was only beginning. The forest had claimed a secret. And someone, or something, would go to any length to protect it. The following morning, the rain had ceased, but the forest remained cloaked in mist, grey and impenetrable. Elena parked at the edge of the village and turned to the girl. "We need to know what they want," she said. The girl hesitated. "It is not just about me. The forest, it hides something. Something very old. Something they will kill to protect." Elena frowned. "What is it?" The girl shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "I only know parts. A cabin. A key. And a name. One that should never be spoken aloud." Elena's pulse quickened. "Tell me the name." The girl whispered, barely audible. "Lucinda." The word felt like ice in Elena's mouth. She had heard of it before, stories whispered among villagers of a girl lost decades ago, a girl connected to the heart of Ashford Hollow Forest. No one had ever found her. Elena understood now why the note had said, "Return the girl." They were not just looking for any child. They were looking for Lucinda. Together, they moved deeper into the forest, following the faint path Elena had discovered the previous night. Every step seemed to draw them further into another world, where the air was thick with moisture and shadows twisted unnaturally. Branches reached out like hands. Leaves whispered secrets she could not understand. And the girl clutched Elena's arm tightly, guiding her silently. After what felt like hours, they came to a clearing. In the center stood a stone circle, overgrown with moss and ivy. The girl's hand trembled as she pointed. "There." Elena approached cautiously. In the center of the stones was a shallow pit, covered by a layer of roots and leaves. She knelt, brushing away the debris, revealing an old wooden box beneath. The girl gasped. "That's it. That's what they've been protecting." Elena opened the box slowly. Inside, she found bundles of letters, photographs, and a small carved pendant. The letters were brittle, faded, their words barely legible, but the dates confirmed it. They were decades old. And the girl in the photographs, the resemblance was uncanny. Lucinda. The girl had been right. Suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling violently around the clearing. The trees groaned and the air grew sharp. Elena looked up. Figures moved among the branches. Shadows. Dark shapes descending silently, circling the clearing. The girl whispered, voice shaking. "They've found us." Elena grabbed the girl's hand. "We have to run." They turned, sprinting back through the forest, but this time the darkness seemed alive. Twigs snapped behind them. A voice hissed through the trees, cold and commanding. "Return what is ours." Elena's chest burned with panic. They were not just protecting a secret. They were guarding it with a vengeance. And somewhere, in the depths of Ashford Hollow, Lucinda's story waited to be revealed. Night had fallen, and Ashford Hollow was silent except for the whispers of the forest. Elena and the girl, whose name she now knew was Lucy, ran blindly through the mudslick paths, guided only by the dim glow of distant village lights. Elena's mind raced, remembering the letters, the photographs, and the pendant. Everything pointed to one truth: Lucinda had been hidden here for a reason, a secret too dangerous for the world outside. Suddenly, the trees opened to a small clearing. A circle of ancient stones stood like silent sentinels, their surfaces covered in moss. In the center, a faint light glimmered, flickering as if alive. Elena stopped, drawing Lucy close. "This is it." From the shadows emerged the figures who had haunted the forest. Cloaked and silent, they circled the clearing. Elena felt the air thicken, each breath sharp against her lungs. A voice, calm and cold, called from among them. "She belongs to the forest." Lucy trembled. "They want me to stay." Elena clenched her fists. "No. You're coming with me." Suddenly, one of the cloaked figures stepped forward. Light caught the scar across his jaw. The man from Fennel Road. He raised his hand slowly, a strange reverence in his motion. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then the earth beneath the stone circle shifted. Roots rose like fingers, forming a barrier, a silent warning. Elena realized the truth. The forest itself was alive, protecting its secret. Protecting Lucinda. And it was willing to fight. The man hesitated. His voice softened. "The girl is bound to this place. The secret cannot leave." Lucy looked at Elena, eyes wide with fear and hope. "What do we do?" Elena whispered. "We trust the forest." And for the first time, she felt the pulse of life around her, the rhythm of the earth, the whispers of the trees, and the weight of decades of secrets. A wind swept through the clearing. The cloaked figures faltered, unsure. The forest seemed to pulse with power, as if testing the courage of those who dared defy it. Elena held Lucy's hand tightly, feeling her warmth, her fear, and her determination. Then, slowly, the forest opened a path. Not away from it, but through it. A path that would lead them to safety, but also demand respect for the ancient secrets it guarded. Elena stepped forward, Lucy following. The man with the scar watched, bowing his head slightly, acknowledging that the forest had chosen. Behind them, the shadows receded. The whispers softened. The forest exhaled, as if releasing a breath it had held for centuries. Elena glanced at Lucy. "You are safe now." Lucy nodded, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "For now." The two of them emerged from Ashford Hollow Forest, exhausted but alive, carrying the weight of the secret with them. The forest behind them returned to silence, but Elena knew that its heart would always beat in the shadows, watching, waiting, and keeping its own counsel. Some secrets, she realized, were never meant to be revealed. Only respected.